the perfection of love, harmony and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. So, welcome to the fourth class in the series of Becoming a Human and Divine Being. And you may have noticed a little change in the invocation. Pirzia sends out a monthly newsletter, and the one that came out today, he has suggested an optional change for the part of the invocation where we normally say, who form the embodiment of the master, the spirit of guidance. You can say master, or you can say messenger, or you can say Rasul, R-A-S-U-L, which is the Sufi term for the messenger. And the reason for that is some people felt that the word master, in the way that it's sometimes used, has got a connotation which is not at all what is implied in this invocation, but we're going to start using messenger instead of master, because I think that really is a nice way of doing it.
It's very respectful of thinking of everybody's feelings, that for which master was not a good connotation at all.
So our theme tonight is mastery, which is very different than the word master. And Hazrat Inayat Khan has one of his works is a wonderful book, which I really encourage you to get. It's called Mastery Through Accomplishment. And you can read it online for free. If you Google Hazrat Inayat Khan online books, you'll come to a site called Wahiduddin's Web or something like that. And Wahiduddin has got all the published books there that you can read for free, but this one's really worth buying, and you could get it on Amazon. It's really a handbook for accomplishment in life. And the way that mastery is normally thought of is what we do in the world, how we get our trip together, so to speak. And this is an important part of our spiritual path. Hazrat Inayat Khan, or as he is affectionately known, Murshid, said that before you undertake the spiritual path, it's like you're going on a long voyage in the ocean. You need to take care of your business on the shore, or things are just going to keep pulling you back. And also, he talked about the importance of accomplishing a goal once you set it, and not just going from one thing to another and just dropping it, because you build up a kind of power or magnetism in doing that. And so these are all very important things. Some parts of what are necessary ingredients on the spiritual journey, you could say, are not the most glamorous ones. For instance, if we're going to become proficient at meditating, we first have to be able to concentrate. And so there are many exercises that Murshid gave and others have given, simple exercises, but it's like a training of the ability to focus the mind on one object. And until we are able to do that, we can sit and perhaps have an enjoyable meditation, but chances are what is going to happen is our mind is just going to wander, and it's going to be just kind of random space out associations, and we're really not going to accomplish very much in doing that. So these are just all necessary steps. Okay. But the kind of mastery I want to talk about is probably going to be a different slant on it than the way that you normally would think about it. So we've been talking for many, many classes, and those of you who have been with us for the previous 2 6-week series about birthing the resurrection body and living in the resurrection body, and now this is the fourth of becoming a human divine being, know that we've talked about this coming to the barzakh, or the meeting place, or the interface between the human and divine, or between our manifest and transcendent aspects of our being. And we've talked about something called relational unity. And as you may recall, relational unity differs from the usual state of affairs, which is a dualistic state of consciousness in which we are perceiving ourselves as separated from whatever it is we're experiencing, whether it's something external in the world or whether it's something internal in our meditation. And in many traditions, the only other choice available is just merging or unity and a total dissolution of our individuality. But the path of Sufism that Murshid brought forth is about awakening of divinity in life. And so there is priceless importance to the uniqueness of our being and maintaining that on the journey and learning how to get into a state of relationship where we're not separated and we're not merged, either one. So there's a mastery required in that. We've talked about the principles of fana, shattering, F-A-N-A, and baka, resurrection or rebirth or reorganization. And we've talked about the in-between state. And I've previously related this process to what's called self-organization, or what's talked about in chaos theory, where a system starts in one state and then there's an intermediate state, and in that state you really can't tell what is going to arise from that. It's kind of nebulous, but it's moving in a certain direction that comes out at the end. And so one aspect of mastery that's important is to be able to maintain the integrity of our being. At the same time, we're letting go of our usual modalities of perception, of conception, of the way we think about ourselves, of the way that we think about what's going on in the world, of the way we relate to our emotions in response to circumstances. We have to be able to release that previous way of relationship and open ourselves up to an emergent, new and different way of relationship that we can't prefigure. We can't just go, well, I know what it's going to be, and I'm just going to take 3 steps in this direction, and I'll be there. It's something that arises in the midst of that relationship between the two sides. And so there's a mastery involved in maintaining that integrity of being. At the same time, we're relaxing our hold on the usual way we've been thinking about ourselves.
So you hear in what he just said a balancing between that focus and then the openness. And I'll be talking about this in several different ways tonight. One word that I want you to hear is Persian word called hamdami, Ham-DAMI, which means a breathing together. This could be a breathing together idea of the spiritual and the manifest. Even a breathing together, what he was just talking about in the 2 aspects of mastery. And these are wonderful opportunities for us to see them not as opposite sides, but as something that is a marriage, you could say, or a union. And this is also a function of our humanity, our manifest humanity, in being able to find a space for these two to become one. So it's an opportunity every time that we hear something, we hear the opposite or something that doesn't seem to be on the same side, that there is an opportunity for you. And I'll talk more about this as we go.
And in spirituality, I guess across traditions, we talk about it's a process of awakening. And so we could think of awakening as awakening to something that's already there, and we're just waking up to it. And that's true on one level. We've talked about that we are multidimensional beings, and we exist in many realms of reality simultaneously. And normally, we're not at all aware of these other realms in which we exist, and our capacities for both awareness and function on those realms are dormant or latent. They have to be developed. They're not just because that's an aspect of our being, we can't do much with it until we develop these skills. And in previous classes, we've done some practices of awakening to different levels of our being. So that's just part of it. Part of awakening is awakening to this much deeper structure of our existence on many levels of reality. But that's just a beginning. And after that, it's awakening to ourselves as a unitive structure of being. And those parts are all in relationship with each other. And there's a circulation between them. And not only that, there is a circulation between ourselves as multidimensional beings and whatever it is that we're experiencing, whether it's something external in the world or something on the inner realms, a higher state of being, a deeper aspect of ourselves, or getting into the consciousness of being in some subtle realm of reality, or a great being, a messenger from the who lived physically in the past, or a saint or a prophet, and getting into the consciousness of that being. So we develop the ability to modulate our consciousness. And that also requires another kind of mastery. It's the ability to fine tune. And so some kind of analogies, anybody that has done any kind of photography where you have a manual setting, you can adjust it until it's just in the right focus that you want. Or if you're using a microscope or a telescope, or if you're even if you're you have a receiver and you're tuning in a particular radio station that's being broadcast, you know, you fiddle with the dial until you get it just right, and then it's clear. There's no static there. So it takes some mastery of our ability to work with our own consciousness to be able to tune it to different frequencies. So that's one kind of mastery. And another kind of mastery is to be able to develop a capacity for making sense out of or understanding what's emerging. Because until we develop that skill, what very commonly happens, and there's nothing wrong with you if this has happened to you, this is a stage, a necessary stage to go through. But oftentimes, let's say people are joining in with a group of experienced meditators, and they haven't had much experience, and it's a guided meditation. Oftentimes, just because of the cohesiveness of the vibration of that group, that new person will be able to get into a high state of meditation, but oftentimes at the end of it, they think that they fell asleep because they aren't able to really remember anything of it. They know they weren't in their usual state, but in actuality, what's probably happened is they have gotten into a different state of consciousness and they're not used to that, and they haven't built an ability to transition from their typical state into that other state. So here's another aspect of mastery that needs to be developed on the spiritual journey. So these are kind of the finer elements of what's necessary if we really want to get to a place where we can both experience what happens from these meetings in the Barzakh that we've talked about, the interface, the meeting place, which is wonderful. You might say, well, that's good enough. But what we've been talking about, this idea of the resurrection body and the divine, being a human divine co-creator, engaging in this co-creative process and exercising this co-creative faculty of our soul, then we have to be able to not only have this coherence of our being, but to be able to bring forth what arises from a desire that we bring to this meeting place. So let me back up a bit here. Hazrat Inayat Khan, as I've said many times before, has said that every desire begins with a divine impulse. And he says that that impulse, oftentimes, by the time we're consciously aware of it, has been distorted 180 degrees by all the ways it can get messed up. It's kind of like playing that game of telephone, only it's playing it with ourselves, going through these different levels of being on which we exist. And so step one is recovering that original divine impulse. And oftentimes in spirituality, that's thought of as being, that's it, that's the end goal. You get out of the way, you become an empty vehicle and just bring that impulse through just the way it was. But there's a reason why we have our uniqueness as human beings. There's a reason why there's a human existence, because the divine being wanted to know him herself, to love and be loved, and so on, and to have things arise which could only come from this relationship. And so we transform that original divine impulse by our experiences in life, by the uniqueness of our being, by what we add to it. And that's what we bring back to the meeting place, to the Barzakh. And now the mastery that I'm talking about is being able to hold that in this state of relational unity and enable it to germinate, to blossom in the new creation that is arising at every instant. But we're putting something into that. We're not just being there on the sidelines watching something come forth. We are an essential part of that process, and becoming capable of that process enables us to fulfill the reason why we were created in the first place.
So we may be in the middle of one of these, this process that he's talking about, and something's germinating. Well, often our ego gets involved at that point, and and now it has many different reasons why we might not want to stop. We might want to stop what we're doing here, and we might feel insufficient to the task, or we might feel, unfamiliar territory here. This is not where I am and who I am, and so there could be many different things that would pull us back. So recognizing all these different things in the process are very important. And looking at them and seeing, oh, this is a pattern that I've been doing quite a bit. Maybe I'm trying to be the better one. And so maybe I can relax that a little bit and see what's in back of what's this process that's coming through that's in back of my clenched up feelings here. And it has to be done in a loving way, really, because we're dealing with our own habits, our own usual way of doing things. They might be more familiar to some of us that are in quarantine here with our spouse, and we're seeing these things more intensely than we had before because they're happening much more often. We're with this person even more. So sometimes we can take a look at some of those things and remember, well, there's a newness, a baby consciousness, a baby idea that is being birthed here, and perhaps I can let these things go, and maybe I can see what I can do to ease those feelings so that I can tend to this more wonderful task that we have together. So I think that would help us just to remember that this new creation is about to unfold all the time. And we are being asked to be a big part of that process.
So the circumstances that we're dealing with, and there's always challenges, and there's always difficulties, and there's always obstacles, and there's always many things we could start a list. If these things just weren't there, it'd be so easy to meditate. I wouldn't have to be stressed out by this or that. And so we've talked before about major shifts in consciousness and even ways of understanding and thinking that need to take place, quantum leaps for spiritual transformation to take place. And one of these major transformations initially doesn't seem to be in the very glamorous category, and that's finding a way to relate to these circumstances that we wish would go away, that opens up our being as opposed to produces reaction and shutdown in our being, and one that enables us to move towards relational unity as opposed to a just ingrained dualistic me versus this and that and them state of being. So I've said many times, and I believe this so strongly that every single situation and circumstance is a potential portal, potential opening to the sacred. And that doesn't mean it's going to just turn out to be just the most wonderful thing. Another observer might not see anything that's changed in that, but we always, no exception, have the capacity to relate to what's going on in a different way than the reactive way or the separated way. And that shift in our way of relating to it is what opens up something, not only in our own unfoldment, but we've talked about what happens when you link subtle energy with ordinary physical reality, that now things are possible that weren't possible before. The space itself, as William Teller says, has become conditioned. It's been changed. Murshid would say an accommodation or akasha, A-K-A-S-H-A, has been opened up. A space has been opened up. And it's not, let's see if I can explain this. It's not a space like, well, I'm just going to move some junk out of the way and use this cleared out space over here now. It's actually a space of more possibilities and even more dimensionality that's opened up by virtue of you relating to whatever's going on in this different way, that not only frees you from being stuck in it, but serves as a catalyst. Let's say it's a situation with a difficult person, for them to at least have the possibility of discovering something deeper in their own being where they don't stay stuck in where they've been. And you can't count on that. You can't go, well, it didn't work because they're still acting like a jerk. They may not change at all, but maybe something will change in them 3 years from now. You don't know, and you can't be attached to it. It's like the Bhagavad Gita said, act for the sake of acting, but not being attached to the fruit of your actions. So this is a kind of mastery that we have so many opportunities to practice in our daily life. And when we start to do this, things will change for us. Perhaps not instantly, because as Ravani Ra said, we have our habitual habits and patterns, and the most deeply ingrained of those in spirituality have been termed in yoga as samskaras, these old patterns, or karma. It's like the conditioned ways of relating that keep producing results that perhaps are maladaptive, but we can free ourselves from those. I've quoted this Sufi many times who lived hundreds of years ago, and he said, "Oh man, if you but knew that you are free, it's your thought of captivity that keeps you in chains." So take it as an experiment, take it as a hypothesis. Take the circumstances you're dealing with right now that are the most challenging, and Pirbalai would always say, well, what if? What if you see this as your perfect opportunity for bringing forth a blooming in wonderful ways of whatever divine quality is really needed in this circumstance, whether it's compassion or truth, or it might be joy, it might be beauty or whatever. Here's the place where this is the antidote. I mean, it's the Sufis and the alchemists talk about the philosopher's stone. It's something that is a catalyst that brings life to whatever is around it and doesn't get used up in the process. We can be that. Different levels. Well, it's quite time for it. So, okay, we're just having a little on-the-fly consultation here, so we'll just. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm very interested in the idea that we are, as beings on the spiritual path, very well equipped for manifesting. And so this is really part of the story about, as Hazrat Inayat Khan said, that our purpose, our dharma in life is to be a human being. That is our goal, is to be a human being. And we talked about the human divine. We're bringing in many qualities that are helping out that process, but It's towards manifestation. It's toward being in the world, like this whole idea of mastery. And so what are the different things? How are we set up here? What have we learned in order to make us better at manifesting maybe than somebody else that hadn't been meditating? Well, for one thing, as we talked about the realms or the planes of manifest of being last time, angelic and so on, we are open to higher spheres that are refreshing, that are blessing, that are so full of light, that help us in our path. Let's say that we have a very difficult job and that's very tiring, but we can really lean back onto this meditation for the ability that it has and that we have to remember who we are in the higher aspects, so that we really can dig in and do some really difficult things. I'm thinking about many of our professions that we went into and studied for many years and got degrees. And I'm remembering my teaching career, and it was a challenge every day to get up and go to my job and deal with, I had special ed kids that I worked with, and there was always something very difficult that I would face, but I really had this, not only the meditation itself, but this feeling in back of what was going on, that that there was a blessing, there was a way to do this, and that I was never alone with it, and that I was refreshed a lot of the time. So you know what I'm talking about. Another one was our possibilities are available as choices. Okay, so that he was just talking about that when you link the spiritual part of ourselves with the manifest, then all of a sudden there are more possibilities available. Well, here we are, if we're manifesting things in life, we have more ideas of possibilities than we would otherwise. And those come to us through the, I would say, proliferation of ideas in the mental sphere, the proliferation of the archetypes from our plane of treasury, we call it. And then because our idea of the meeting place is expanded in what we do, for example, looking at the Barzakh and the great contact that we understand between all the different realms and we experience through all the different realms. For example, tuning into different spiritual beings, tuning into different realms, the effects of what we do as a manifest being are manifest and multiplied. They are multiplied because of all the contact that we do have and that we realize. It's one thing if we say, well, I know that I am in touch with all these beings, but it's another thing when we have the experience of it, when we've gone through many years of meditation and we have that sense of presence. So it's not only are we doing something, and we talked about this before too, as an individual in this one circumstance, if we know who we really are, then it is communicated with many beings. Another thing is that we, let's see here about the Wazaif, because we have worked with many sacred words or Wazaif, it's enabled more qualities to infuse in us and in our process, and it's more likely that they'd succeed. So we have taken, sometimes for years, a sacred word and worked with it. And there is a reality of that unfolding of what that is in our being. And because we are able to work with many of these amazing blessings, it changes our, well, it changes us in a way that people can relate to us sometimes. You've had this happen too, that people kind of know you immediately sometimes, or they feel a sisterly, brotherly feeling from you. Uh, and sometimes then you can also awaken that in other beings. So it really makes work in the world a lot more easy. Now, there is a sensitivity that we acquire also. So that's something that sometimes we need to understand and work with. But I feel like we become very well prepared for being a human being and doing our spiritual practices.
So speaking of this sensitivity, oftentimes people attracted to the spiritual path are already pretty sensitive people, and many people who are attracted to the spiritual path have difficulties in life because of that. They're really more strongly affected by all the out of balance or negative energy that might be around. And so part of mastery on the journey is to develop a strength without losing that sensitivity. Uh, and what are some needed ingredients in developing that strength? Well, first is balance, to balance our energies. Uh, and practices as simple as the elemental breaths, which most of you are familiar with, the purification breaths, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, help to balance these elements in our being, to take care of basic needs, uh, including our physical needs, because sometimes uh, people on a spiritual path are really wanting just to be very ethereal beings, and so they may have a kind of diet that makes them very spacey, but it makes it even more difficult for them to function in the world. And Shiva, I mean, the great yogi master, archetypal yogic master, had sometimes would have his followers eat meat because they needed that groundedness to be able to deal with things in the world. So we want to become very strong beings in the world, but not strong in the sense of ego strong and just pushing things and being in even a more dualistic state, but very balanced beings that have a power that is much more so than personal power. That when we open up to these deeper levels of our being, we have access to uh, power source that is unlimited, really. And we can be able to function in the world and recharge our batteries when they run low. We can, if we're engaged in healing, we can work with healing where we're not giving someone else our own personal energy, because not only will that deplete us, but that'll make us vulnerable to get whatever problem they have that we're trying to help them get rid of. And so we need that strength, we need that balance. Psychologically, what do we need? We need self-confidence. We need a trust that we're not going to lose ourselves in the process of opening up to these deeper levels of our being. And at first, it's kind of like testing the waters, and the water is very cold, and you just stick a toe in, and you stick a little more of your foot in, but then at some point you just jump in. And with practice, we're able to experience freer states of consciousness that if initially we just got into those, that might be scary because we think, I've lost myself. Where am I? Am I going to disappear in this? But if we develop that self-confidence, then we have that trust that we can open, we can be explorers in the spiritual realms, we can be pioneers even in the spiritual realms. And what does that mean? Because each of us has access to a unique part of the divine wisdom, we can not only access that divine wisdom, but we can further it by our experiences, by the way that we relate, by bringing our desire forth to the meeting place and discovering what arises in that. So let me do another little segue over here. And as you can see, and this is a way that Ravani Ra and I often teach over time will weave different things together that we brought up at other times, and sometimes we repeat something, but it's connecting it with something else, so we get a clearer and more cohesive picture of what's going on. Uh, and so we're connecting these parts of our story. We talked about the allegory of our soul, the kind of the ongoing story of our being that's not finished. It's not that we're just living into something that's written up there in the Akashic records. It's each page is being created as we go along. And another part of mastery is realizing that we're beings that don't just exist in time and space, that don't just exist in physical manifestation going through the years of our life. That's certainly a part of us. That's, as Pir Vilayat would say, that our bodies are spacesuits that we use to experience the conditions of planet Earth, and they're sacred and they're very important, but they're certainly by no means all of who we are. We're beings that exist even outside of what we think of as time. We're beings that exist in transcendent realms. And this story, this allegory of our being, is a story that goes through all of that. It goes through what we think of as past and present and future. It's a story that goes through realms that are far beyond the physical realm of manifestation. But all of these different states of our being aren't sitting in different places somewhere. They're all there. And English doesn't have a good word, but the best word is simultaneous. They're all are co-present with each other, and our consciousness can't possibly take it all in at once. Just like we couldn't possibly take in the consciousness of everything that there is at once. It doesn't fit. We have to have a vehicle to relate to everything from. And we can't put infinity in there. We can modulate it. And so we can modulate our consciousness into these different aspects of our being in this life, through time and space, beyond this life, before this life, after this life, and so on, and get to a way of being where we can experience all of that as us, not just this as a little piece of it that somehow or eventually is going to get to some other part. It's all part of this one story that we can zoom in on different parts of.
Okay. I have some now in regard to the breathing.
Yeah, let's just keep going.
Okay. And in this situation, I'd like you to participate. Remember last time we talked about the different planes. I'm going to go through those and give you a simple word to use in, in labeling them so that we can work with them. And the first one was the material plane, the plane that we often think that we are in, the bodies that we are sitting here in. And you can also, Nasut is another name for that. Now, we'll think of these in a pattern that we have the different planes related to each other in a certain way. So if we think of starting right here with Nasut or the material, and think of straight ahead of you as we did in the exercise last time, facing you would be Malakut, or in this case, we're going to say imaginal body. They'll be facing the imaginal body. Then on the other side, that now we're going to imagine above the head of this material body, we have the next realm. So it's like kind of zigzagging from here to Malakut, which is the imaginal body, up here to the angelic plane. And this we call Jabarut. Now that's over the head of this material body, you might say. Zigzagging fashion, going back over the head now of the Malakut. We think of the next one up, which would be the Lahut. This is called the treasury. It is also the place of all of the archetypes. So now that would be over the top of the Malakut and related to the Jabarut that we just came up from. And then finally, back over the top of the let's see, now I'm getting mixed up.
Treasury.
The treasury, well, across from the treasury, but above the angelic or Jabarut would be Hahut. So let me say these again. Material body, imaginal body, angelic body, treasury, and then we're going to call Hahut the mystery. So our chore, our wonderful opportunity here and our challenge is to breathe from one to the other. And hopefully, as we are learning how to have marriages between these or connect all of these, allowing the breath to circulate between all these so we can start to feel a little bit about what these are and share with each other. So this would be the pattern. Rather than saying the prayer that we did the last time, which was, "This is not my body, it is the temple of God," we're going to just have a breath. And we're going to be inhaling as the material body and exhaling, thinking of the next body in front of you. And we're going to do the zigzag like this. And that body being the imaginal body. So that would be like a dream body. So why don't we just both, all of this, do that. Inhaling material body, exhaling dream body. All right, now imagine that you are on the other side of this, being that dream body, looking at the material body, inhaling and exhaling toward the material body. Also, I mean, if you can feel both of those at once, that would be ideal, but I'm, in this case, just having you think of imaginal body. All right, next, you inhale as the imaginal body and exhale as the angelic body up here. Inhale, exhale. And now imaginal was going to look up at our angelic inhales and exhales into the imaginal. You probably are just thinking of these right now. Later, you'll get the full experience. All right, now inhaling as the angelic being and exhaling up toward the treasury. Now inhaling as the treasury and exhaling to the angelic. And finally, inhaling as the treasury, archetypes, and exhaling in the mystery. And then the one more would be inhaling as the mystery and exhaling all the way up to the divine. You might feel some connection in that already. And each step that you do is wonderful. And if you can get all of these going at once, you will definitely feel an effect. So keep this with you. And if you have any questions about it, I would be happy to have you email me, ravanira@aol.com. Pretty easy to remember. Blessings. Okay.
So I'd like to share a practice also. And this is a practice I talked earlier about the mastery, about maintaining this cohesiveness of being to the barzakh, to the meeting place. And part of that is a process of attunement, of getting ourselves in harmony and in tune, but also in tune with what we're trying to connect with, which is the divine aspect of our being, however you might think of it, as our personal Lord or our personal angel, coming to this meeting. And the term that I use to describe this, it's like docking. It's like two things connecting with each other, really getting on the same wavelength. And I'll have a feeling when I'm engaging in this process of when it's starting to get close. It's like you start to feel a little nibble, and then it becomes more clear and more coherent. And then at some point, it just really has opened up fully. And so this practice we're going to do is aiming at that. It's first of all getting into that subtle state of our being, and then having that mastery that doesn't separate, that mastery that brings about coherence and harmony and maintains the intention that we bring our part of the transformation of the divine desire to this meeting place so something can emerge from that. And we're going to put together 3 different sacred words to do this practice. And the first one, and as you recall, when we invoke a divine qualities, we first say Yah. Y-A means O, O-H, whatever it is. So the first one is Yah Latif, L-A-T-I-F. And Latif means the subtle. So as we say Yah Latif, we're allowing ourselves to get into a very subtle state of consciousness. It's like we're turning within, we're turning awareness, we're turning down the dials on the physical senses, so we're not really tuning in too much to the external environment or even to the physical senses of experiencing our body, physical body. We're just getting to a very refined state of being on Yah Latif. So say that, Yah Latif. Okay, so that's the first part of this. And the second part is Yah Wali, W-A-L-I. Wali means the divine mastery, and in the sense that I'm talking about. It's not brute force mastery. It's not pushing through ego power. In this sense, it's that mastery that I've been trying to describe that takes place in this inner process of deep connection and relationship with the more subtle and transcendent aspect of our being. So say that, Yah Wali. Wali. And the third part, we're going to say Yah Fazl. And many of you have worked with Fazl, F-A-Z-L. And when you say Fazl by itself, you don't usually say the Yah, it's the sound Fazl, Fazl. And Fazl means harmony, so it's harmonizing our being. But here, it fits better to say Yah Fazl. And when we say this in this practice, we've gotten to this subtle state of being. We're maintaining this coherence of being, and now we're really coming into harmony with the meeting place, with the divine aspect of our being on Fazl. So it's going to be Yah Latif, Yah Wali, Yah Fazl. So we'll do this, and you may want to do this with your eyes closed because we're really wanting to get to an inner subtle state. So I'll say it aloud a few times and then say it with me, and we'll do it. Okay, the meaning again, Latif means the subtle or the refined. L-A-T-I-F, Yah Latif. Yah Wali, W-A-L-I, means divine mastery. And Yah Fazl, F-A-Z-L, means divine harmony. So subtle, mastery, harmony. Okay, so I'll say it a few times and then join with me. And we'll say it again slowly and try it with your eyes closed. Yah Latif, Yah Wali, Yah Fazl, Yah Latif, Yah Wali, Yah Fazl, Yah Latif, Yah Wali, Yah Fazl, Ya Ya Latif, Ya Wali, 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 Ya. And now the fikr, which is on the breath without the ya. So think Latif as you inhale, Wali as you start to exhale, and Fazil on the remainder of the exhalation. So inhale Latif, start exhaling Wali, and continue exhaling Fazil at your own rate, but do it slowly. And really feel as you're doing this that you are coming to this state of meeting with the divine aspect of your being. You are bringing together the two sides of your human divine being, which is expressed through your resurrection body. So let's do this for a while at your own rate. Then the fikr asir, which means the secret of the practice. So let go of the words and even the thoughts of the words, and just let yourself experience this deep relationship as a human divine being. Amen.
Yeah. So I'd like to finish with a poem. This is a poem by Hafiz in The Gift, and it's called A Root in Each Act and Creature. A root in each act and creature. The sun's eyes are painting fields again. Its lashes with expert strokes are sweeping across the land. A great palette of light has embraced this earth. Hafiz, if just a little clay and water mixed in his bowl can yield such exquisite scents, sights, music, and whirling forms, what unspeakable wonders must await with the commencement of unfolding of the infinite number of petals that are the soul? What excitement will renew your body when we all begin to see that his heart resides in everything? God has a root in each act and creature that he draws his mysterious divine life from. His eyes are painting fields again. The beloved with his own hands is tending, raising like a precious child himself in you. And I'd like to return to this idea of hamdami again for a moment, which again was breathing together, conspiring, respiration together with the other. So I'd like you to think about the joys in your own life that you have, what makes you joyous, what's fun, what's lively, what you're thankful for. Knowing these things are these things that have been formed as in this poem, these joyous things that have been manifest by the divine in life, and that God is enjoying each of these that are happening within you. That is just the source that he has in each one of you, that she has in each one of you, and is gaining all of the presence and happiness from. And then on the other side is our working very hard in our practices and trying to understand and all of these things. And so now the hamdami is holding both of these together, that joy, and on the other side, that hard work that we have. And both of these together, conspiring together, will get us that joy and that fulfillment that the divine is looking for in this amazing experiment that we're all doing together. And know that it is happening, just like this last step of the meditation that Azarbash was doing. It was an opportunity to just see what is there. Don't push anything. Just see what is in your presence and communicate that to the divine. There can't be anything more beautiful than that. Thank you.